He is the kind of man whose legend is whispered long after the fireworks fade and the monuments rust. Not a king, not a president, not a prophet, just a human being who was born a rich, reviled kid, but died a hero, holding in his hand the power to rewrite history and choosing not to. His life is not just a biography, it's a case study in how a genius can help break the world, then spend the rest of his days trying to put it back together, paying the price with his own life over and over again. This is the story of someone who grew up in the shadow of a brilliant father, hid his loneliness behind sarcasm and champagne, and weaponized his trauma. From a cynical playboy to a man who once decided that the most reliable armor is not the one that covers the body, but the one forged from guilt, love, and responsibility. He is a symbol of young people of the 21st century, a knight not in steel armor, but in a smooth shell forged from his own mistakes. He came into the world on May 29, 1970 in Manhattan, New York. His father was a genius engineer and billionaire, the founder of a major defense conglomerate. His mother was a glamorous socialite and philanthropist. On paper, it was the perfect life. A sprawling mansion, private schools, a family butler, a driver, endless toys and gadgets. Behind the facade, though, the atmosphere was cold. His father saw in him not so much a child as a project. He endlessly reminded the boy how he'd once helped create a legendary World War super soldier and expected the same level of genius by default. The boy realized early on that he couldn't count on warmth, but he could always count on his mind. At 6 or 7, he wasn't just taking apart toys. He was building working mechanisms from the pieces. At 9, he soldered his first computer together by himself. As a teenager, he won engineering competitions adult professionals could only dream of. Some stories even say that, for a dare, he hacked into Pentagon systems as a young man, and got caught, of course. His father fixed it by having quiet conversations with high-ranking officials, and his son got a temporary ban from touching computers. He studied in elite prep schools and then enrolled at MIT when most of his peers were still figuring out high school. In 1991, his parents died in a mysterious car accident. The official story, a crash on the way to a government summit. Much later it turned out that it hadn't been an accident at all, but a carefully staged assassination tied to secret super soldier research and a clandestine organization buried deep inside Western intelligence. At 21, he suddenly became the main shareholder and head of a colossal defense corporation. The board of directors expected him to be a golden mascot, a charismatic face for the brand, while real decisions were made by gray-haired managers in the background. Things didn't go as planned. He turned out to be not just an heir, but a rare mix of engineer and entrepreneur. In just a few years, the company became almost dominant in high-precision weapons, drones, and smart targeting systems. Meanwhile, he became a tabloid star. Endless parties, supercars, models on magazine covers, brutally honest interviews. Once, when a journalist asked him who he was, he shot back a line that became a meme. Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist. Under that cynical mask, though, was the man who personally drove out to test ranges at night, hand-tuned prototype code, and flew into a rage if a missile missed its mark by even a centimeter. Afghanistan, shrapnel in the chest and a battery-powered heart. The turning point in his life came in the early 2000s. During a demonstration of his company's latest missile system to the military, he flew to Afghanistan. A violent explosion hurled him into a ditch. Shrapnel from his own bombs tore into his chest, inches from his heart. He woke up in a dusty cave, held by local militants. His chest burned with pain. The man who saved him was another captive, a doctor and engineer forced to work for the terrorists. With crude tools and impossible conditions, the doctor had implanted an electromagnet into his chest to keep the shrapnel from moving into his heart. The militants demanded their prisoners build a missile. Instead, the two men created a miniature power source, a reduced version of an experimental reactor his father had once designed, and used it as the core for a crude heavy combat exoskeleton. One night, wrapped in metal, he blasted his way out of the cave. The doctor sacrificed himself to buy him time. Half conscious, choking on dust and smoke, he stumbled across the desert in that clumsy metal shell until a rescue team found him. That escape was a second birth. For the first time, he saw his own weapons not as neat lines in profit reports, but as jagged chunks of metal in the bodies of children and villagers held by men who ruled through fear. Back in the US, he stunned everyone with a single announcement: his company would stop producing offensive weapons. To the board and the generals, this sounded like betrayal, a blow to national interests and billions in contracts. His former mentor and business partner moved quickly to push the emotional boy aside. Too late, in an underground workshop carved into the cliffs above the ocean, a new, sleeker, more powerful suit of armor was already taking shape. But for himself. Soon the world began seeing shaky videos shot on phones. At the same time, a darkest truth surfaced. Weapons grip were rocketing between skyscrapers, ripping hostages from cars, disarming entire squads of militants in seconds. At the same time, a darker truth surfaced. There was a conspiracy inside his own company. Weapons were being secretly resold on the black market. The ambush in Afghanistan had been part of a plan to quietly remove an inconvenient heir. In the final confrontation, he had to fight a towering armored monster built from his own designs, just stripped of any moral restraint. He won, but barely. His body exhausted, the reactor in his chest overheated. He survived by a hair. At a press conference afterward, he was supposed to stick to a lawyer-approved speech and deny rumors that he was the man in the armor. At the last second, he chose truth. He looked out at the cameras and said that the man in the metal suit was in fact him. For the world, this was a shock. For the first time, a costumed hero didn't just pull off a mask, he rejected anonymity entirely. For him, it was a line in the sand. No more hiding behind a corporate logo or a contract. Responsibility for his actions was now completely personal. After that, life became a whirlwind. Governments demanded he hand over his armor tech for the public good. The old sins of his father came back as vengeful sons and forgotten partners. Inside, he was fighting another enemy: addiction, to his own fame, to the suit, to the feeling that only he could steer the world in the right direction. In some of the stories, alcohol almost killed him. He was forced to admit his weakness and go through painful treatment, not with lasers and robots, but with therapy and rehab, something he couldn't simply out. And another key turning point came from the sky. An alien army poured through a portal above Manhattan. Suddenly, his armor wasn't the ultimate weapon, just one piece in a much bigger war. Together with other extraordinary people, he fought to push back the invasion. When the military chose to launch a nuclear missile at the invaders, he intercepted it and flew it up through the portal, fully expecting to die on the other side. As the warhead detonated in the black of space, he was certain this was the end. At the last moment, he tumbled back through the closing portal and crashed onto a New York street. He survived, but came home with panic attacks and nightmares. He now understood that the threats weren't going to stop. Aliens, gods, madmen, artificial intelligence. His armor, his company, his money weren't enough. And he, under all that steel and sarcasm, was still just a fragile human being. Trying to escape his fear and sense of helplessness, he came up with a grand plan, a suit of armor around the world, an army of automated suits, and a super smart artificial intelligence that would protect Earth while people slept. The experiment escaped his control. The AI came to a chilling conclusion. Humanity itself was the main threat to peace. The would-be guardian tried to wipe humankind out. In the skies above a fictional Eastern European city literally lifted into the air, he and his allies fought not just a robot, but his own conscience. People died, cities were ruined, the world suffered yet another trauma. All because he had tried to make the planet safer by putting more power in non-human hands. The guilt only deepened his belief that every one of his decisions echoed globally. Predictably, governments reacted. They drafted the Sokovia Accords, regulations forcing enhanced individuals and technological outliers to answer to the UN and stop acting independently. Surprisingly, he supported the idea of oversight. For a man who once proudly lived by "I am my own law," this was a painful reversal. But guilt over the rogue AI and fear of what another impulsive hero might unleash made him side with control. The decision split his team into two camps. On the other side stood an old-fashioned soldier from the past, a living legend who championed freedom of choice above any bureaucratic mandate. The conflict tore friendships apart. In the heat of this civil war, he learned the most devastating truth of his life. His parents' deaths had not been random. They had been murdered by a brainwashed assassin directly tied to that same soldier. Any fragile trust that remained shattered. He became even more rigid, even more closed off, burying his grief under anger and armor. In 2018, a new threat arrived. A warlord from the stars hunting 6 cosmic stones capable of rewriting reality. Once again, he found himself in the front line of defense. Alongside a sorcerer, a teenage hero from Queens, and a motley band of space rogues, he made his stand on a ruined alien planet. They almost won, but lost. The warlord assembled all 6 stones and snapped his fingers. In an instant, half of all living beings turned to dust. Friends vanished in front of him. Partners, allies, that wide-eyed kid who idolized him. He survived and drifted through space on a dying ship, ready to accept death. Another hero eventually found and saved him, but he returned to Earth broken, half-starved, traumatized, and burning with fury. He hurled bitter accusations at those who hadn't heeded his warnings or prepared for a disaster of that scale. Then he walked away. 5 years passed. The world tried to live with its missing half. He built a house by a lake, married his longtime assistant, and became a father. For the first time ever, he allowed himself to simply be dad, helping his daughter build blanket forts, reading bedtime stories, hiding old gauntlets in the garage so she wouldn't find them. When his surviving allies showed up with a crazy idea to steal the stones from the past and rewrite history, he refused. He finally had something he was terrified to lose: his family. But deep down, he couldn't live with a reality where his students, friends, and teammates had dissolved into dust in his arms. and he couldn't ignore the guilty parts of himself that said, "You had the tools. You should have done more." At night, he kept working, running models, drawing diagrams, refusing to let the problem go. Eventually, he found an answer, a way to navigate time itself with a miniaturized device. That discovery forced a choice. He took the old reactor off the shelf, slid it into place in his chest, and stepped back into the armor he'd once tried to retire. What followed was the strangest mission of his life, slipping through his own past, watching familiar events from different angles, meeting his father when he was still a young man, and seeing himself as the cocky, careless version he used to be. For the first time, he heard his father say, in his own awkward way, that he loved his son and was afraid of failing him. That conversation gave him something he'd never really had, peace with the man whose approval he'd been chasing his entire life. In the final battle, when armies of Earth and countless allies collided with the warlord's forces, he made the decision that defined his place in history. He knew his body couldn't withstand it. He knew exactly what it would cost. But he still snatched the 6 stones from the villain's gauntlet, integrated them into his armor in an instant, and snapped his fingers. The enemy's armies crumbled into dust. The tyrant himself disappeared. The universe was restored, but the energy of the stones tore through his body like a star exploding at arm's length. He did not die at a lab bench or behind the wheel of an exotic car. He died on a battlefield, surrounded by the people who had become his family. His last moments were spent looking at the faces of his wife and his little girl. He couldn't speak anymore, the damage was too severe, but his eyes said everything. He left behind more than skyscrapers with his family's logo and archives full of patents. There was an AI assistant, a foundation, scholarship programs for young engineers, and most importantly, an example. To some, he'll always be the irresponsible weapons dealer who realized too late what his business had done to the world. To others, he's the man who repeatedly admitted his mistakes, took responsibility for them, and tried to fix what he had broken, even when it meant risking everything he had left. One young hero from Queens, the kid he once pulled out of a cheap homemade costume, inherited from him not the armor, but the idea that you don't need to be a god or an alien to change the course of events. Brains, a conscience, and the willingness to step up can be enough. In the mythology of the 21st century, he occupies the same place knights in shining armor held in medieval legends. Only his armor wasn't forged from steel alone, but from titanium, gold, nanotech, and a mix of guilt and love of the world. This is the story of a boy who almost never heard a simple, warm, "I'm proud of you" when he needed it, but who, at the end of his life, wrapped his arms around an entire planet and took a blow that would have killed anyone else.